Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 104 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I'm joined again by Chris Feeney from IGEL. Chris, I'm going to be totally honest. I think your role has changed multiple times in the last couple of weeks, and without going too long on it, what is the current Chris Feeney role?
Great question. For the last year and a half ish, um, it's been focused on vertical solutions, and part of that spent time with our product marketing team. But as we've experienced some growth and stuff like that, there's been a need in the office of the CTO for focusing on sort of kind of where I bring my attention to solutioning essentially, and obviously working with partners like you to bring that. And so I'm now in the office of the CTO, working under and supporting both Jason Maffair, our healthcare field CTO, and John Walsh, our critical industries, non-healthcare for the most part, field CTO. But focus on solutioning, vertical solutions specifically. So that is what my role is right now,
Okay.
in a
Well,
nutshell.
I know that's got potential for us as a big IGEL partner and a big ServiceNow partner. I know you're helping us maybe bring those two technologies together with maybe some back-end integration or some integrations that we publish out on the ServiceNow store. So I appreciate that. And anything we can do to get that going.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that we know who to figure that out, we'll continue that conversation that started a couple years ago with when you guys got Fred going. And congrats on all the success you've had with that. A little note on sort of that thing. Yeah, for me, my journey is now I'm in my eighth year at IGEL, and as I've gotten through into different roles, one of my favorite parts of my time here has been working with the channel partners, understanding their business, who they work with, but more specifically as our messaging has evolved and our solutions have evolved, it's become more apparent to me that it's IGEL plus every single time, whether that's hardware, whether that's a software, whether that's a better together, whatever it might be. But customers are looking for and partners are looking for a solution. And our topic today is a solution that we've come up with. Looking forward to talking about this because it's um, an overlooked problem that
Yeah.
we hope to address.
Yeah, a solution or is what I call a platform. A lot of times, I do a lot of conversations around Citrix, Omnissa, Island, parallels as it relates to IGEL. If you take one of those pieces and add it to the Linux IGEL platform or operating system you guys have, you combine the two of those things together. It could just be a browser, could just be a regular old Chrome browser. Island browser would be even better. Now you've got what I call a solution that's made up of an operating system platform and a very applicable application piece, well, multiple or single application piece, and you've really come up with a solution that, in many, many cases in the business world, can just totally make Windows on the endpoints irrelevant. And sometimes, and you're actually doing it right now. I think you're using Windows 365, I believe,
That's
to
correct.
run to run the recording for this podcast. So, and I assume you're using an IGEL device, which I know you are, an IGEL
Correct.
device to talk to a Windows where it belongs in the cloud PC, and you combine those two together, an application running on a platform talking to a back-end system like Windows 365, and now you have a solution that what we're going to talk about here applies to, as well as lots of other enterprise class capabilities that you're bringing to the mix. So the blog today is closing the endpoint gap in business continuity and disaster recovery by James Millington from September of this year. Just to kind of tee this up, lots of organizations have been bit by the underthinking or not planning ahead. Okay, I get we need we need disaster recovery in our data center. We need business continuity in our data center. Oh, but what happens, which is the common thing now, when the endpoint side of the equation gets attacked or broken or what have you? It could just be a bad keyboard. It could be a bad file structure on the operating system that causes it not to work. What happens when that endpoint no longer functions? And that's what IGEL is addressing here, and we're going to cover it in today's blog that James put out in September. So
Yeah, definitely.
let me just start by asking this, Chris, and I kind of teed it up here a little bit, but in general, what's the number one reason why you think people don't plan for business continuity at the endpoint?
I think everything, as there's been some consolidation with the data center, obviously, you've got that's where you're generally speaking accessing stuff. And so there's been a tremendous amount of focus, even going back 20 plus years, right, where started hearing some of these vendors offer hosted data centers, right? And you started seeing customers go with either that as a backup option, maybe a hot standby, warm standby, cold standby, whatever it was, but just something where they had the ability to switch over to it. But rarely did you hear a conversation around, what about the devices being used? And granted, we weren't dealing with ransomware and malware to the extent that we see almost every single day, like we are today in our interconnected world. And so, where where it's come up is you've got all, and plus now we got the rise of the cloud in certain industries. So when I came to IGEL 8 years ago, for example, I was still thinking, when is healthcare going to begin to embrace the cloud? When is the Fed government, beginning to do that, right? In the world of end user computing. And a lot's changed in that particular period of time, as so has the efforts of those nefarious actors trying to compromise the endpoint devices. And so I think there's been a tremendous amount of, well, let's make sure our data and everything is restored. But then they think, well, we talk about all the time, what are we using to get to that? And that's where I think there's been this, oh, well, what do you guys have ideas for? I don't know, and so we're uncovering that this is often the overlooked problem, this endpoint gap.
Chris, I agree with that. At the same time, if my argument would be in the beginning, the bad guys attacked the data center. We've got those things somewhat resilient at this point. Now they're attacking the endpoint. And so organizations are now starting to realize that's where they've got to move their strategy to not only the data centers more than likely, but also the endpoint. And as much as we want to talk about thinking we're being strategic, we're really just chasing the ball.
That's a great point. True. I think as people have realized the benefits of the security around having a cloud or hybrid cloud or whatever you want, ability to rapidly restore, virtualization technologies that can help you, snapshot things and recover quickly. Whereas a lot of the security tools shifted and a lot of them is on the endpoint. We talk about this all the time. And but you still deal with physical devices that may have a problem, not just being attacked from a software perspective, but what if the hard drive happens to go or something else, right? And so that's where, you know, is it a matter of a bunch of replacement devices waiting in the wings or something else, right? And so we're
You
saying,
mean you mean to run down to Best Buy and buy all the Chromebooks or Windows PCs doesn't work?
yeah, it's a great point, right? What if there's 12 others that are doing the same thing, or there was a fire sale, back to school sale, and nobody has anything left, is that really what you're going to hope your strategy on? Is that there'll be some spare devices waiting in the wings?
Well, and then also just factor in that most of these stores have kind of just-in-time inventory anyway. They don't keep 100 of whatever it is on the shelf anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, for the stuff that you guys have been doing over the years with, taking older devices, I mean, I've seen it many, many times over going on site with customers, seeing, these back rooms where we're setting things up and they've got piles on piles of devices that are destined, generally speaking, for the dumpster, right? And they could be perfectly reused or ready to go or what have you. And that wasn't how they were thinking.
Yeah.
And so there's opportunity to continue to extend the life of these devices, whether they are your backup options in case something happens, or you do it more strategically, like we're saying here with our new solution that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Let's talk about the solutions plural. It's really double clicking on one of them. There is one more section here in the blog that James wrote. It's called "Why Recovery Takes So Long." It says IBM did a study. 76% of organizations that recover from breach took more than 100 days to fully recover. 26% needed over 150 days. while just 2% managed to get their recovery down to 50 days. That's a lot of lost productivity, a lot of lost business opportunity, and quite frankly, a lot of money. I talk to your CEO Klaus all the time, and he's like, "Look, the security guys know this is a problem, and they're willing to spend money to fix this." I'm not sure what I know. There's all types of people listening to this podcast. My overarching message here, when it comes to security and being able to recover in less than a handful of days, hopefully within hours in this case, this is well worth the money.
Yeah. Well, case in point, right? What do we see? Not necessarily a breach, but more of an update outage is what we refer to it. And we're talking obviously about the CrowdStrike incident, right? Where a trusted vendor pushed out an update that unfortunately had a bad impact. It required physically touching devices, every single one of them that was impacted at the physical layer. In the data center, same sort of thing, right? And so a lot's changed in the last year as Microsoft has made some changes to try to address something like that. But still, how much time did it take a lot of these organizations that didn't have the manpower to go out and rapidly recover these devices? So these numbers are and that was, again, that wasn't a ransomware scenario like we've seen, or malware where you have to, investigate, or with cybersecurity and figure out how bad it really is. It's cybersecurity month right now, and so one of the things that I was looking at that recently occurred over in Europe was um, a third-party vendor had a tool that was being used in respect to airports, and there was a breach there, and it worked its way down to the endpoint. Presumably, those endpoints were running Windows, and about 1,000 of them, for example, at Heathrow, were impacted, taken down, and that's where the users were just accessing to do things like, bag checks, checking in, going into the gate, all that type of stuff, and so who knows how long it's going to take to recover those devices. But these numbers are not unheard of.
Yeah,
Um,
it's happening every day. It may not be another update outage like we saw before, but it is literally happening every day, every industry across the world. The easy one to find is like you just described, kind of the airport, and that's the airport signage. That's a great example. I don't walk into an airport without seeing some sign down because it's got some kind of blue screen of death or some update in progress.
yeah, I
Ton
saw
of it in
one.
hotels.
Yeah, totally. You see it in hotels. I've seen it just in the last month, and I've had several locations I've been to where there was some digital signage up, and it had, something regarding Windows, or it was a boot that required somebody to physically touch to get it to boot correctly, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I stay in Marriott's a lot, and most of the Marriott's I go in now, there's a large percentage of them. The hotel kiosk down in the lobby is sitting on some screen where somebody has to hit the button to tell it to accept the favorites or accept some of the default things, and it just boots back into that over and over and over again, and nobody even notices. It's just become so mainstream to expect that. Let's talk about the next section here. It says IGEL's unique answer, fast, secure endpoint recovery. And James breaks it down into three different options or three different categories here. The first is this new thing, which I think we want to focus on probably the most, which I'm super excited about. I haven't had a chance to put it on my primary laptop yet, but I can't wait to. And that is the IGEL dual boot recovery option. Chris, you want to explain that one?
Yeah, so the concept of having on the same hard drive, the same endpoint device, the ability to boot to more than one operating system is not new. And so what we've done is, understanding what's happening, right? We have customers that obviously, we've tried to, push very hard that, hey, for the preventive security architecture model that we've had since day one, it would be very wise of you to run IGEL in production, but there's a lot of companies that are not yet ready to go there for different reasons. So if that's the case, we're saying it's not a matter of if, but when. And so if you have a device running Windows, generally speaking, there's probably space on the hard drive that can be leveraged. And so we can install IGEL, a different version of IGEL OS, that will be installed right alongside Windows. in a partition, and we have a KB article that talks about, how large that partition will end up being, whatever. But it's there in the scenario where, hey, we got hit by ransomware, we got hit by something, right? There's an outage, and so we have to switch over. And so what happens is, you go to reboot and you get a boot menu. The default is Windows, and so you would switch to IGEL dual boot, and that will become the new default. And for obvious reasons, if the Windows partition needs to be investigated or preserved or whatever, you don't want that to come up again and re-compromise or whatever like that. So IGEL will become the new default boot, right alongside on the same hardware. So um,
So, Chris, you said, I want to challenge something real quick. You said default boot, so it becomes one of the options. Can you actually make it the default where the operating system just loads up in from the bootloader to IGEL by default and Windows becomes a secondary option?
Um, yeah, let me think about this. So if from like, hey, I want this to be IGEL be my primary for production all the time versus the dual boot, which is designed for recovery, essentially.
Yeah.
I think technically you probably can, but it's primarily designed so that Windows already on the endpoint, we go to install IGEL, we won't become the default OS. Presumably Windows is still fine until it isn't.
Yeah.
But once you select the dual boot option in the recovery scenario, yeah, the presumption is Windows has been compromised for some reason, whatever it might be, and we need to go to dual boot into IGEL, and we become the default from that point on until you decide to switch it or whatever.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, I can't wait to play with it. And I just had this thing running through my head. Okay, what if I made IGEL my default and I used it for a month and then I said, oh, let's move back to Windows today. Then I'd have to sit there and get all the updates and madness.
Yeah, and this is a great point because for those that are familiar with IGEL, right? I mean, we repurpose devices, and so our primary mode, this is why this is a separate install file. Essentially, is we are going to replace Windows on the entire disk drive. So if you just pull down our normal OS creator tool, or decide to push it out through SCCM. Our default scenario for years and years has been to replace Windows on the endpoint. So we're going to blow whatever's there away and put IGEL on the entire disk drive or whatever. This is a different solution. It's not going to replace Windows on the endpoint. It's going to set up IGEL in a separate partition so you have this capability in case something happens. It still takes the same license, the IGEL license, and then the idea is that you would have it for 45 days, 90 days, whatever is needed there to recover until you need to go back to Windows, or maybe you decide IGEL is the thing we need all over, and you decide you want to go production.
I think you're going to see some of that happening, or at least at a minimum, people are going to buy it for business continuity, and then they're going to realize, hey, I like this. There's benefits of this to me, and then all of a sudden, they start to consider IGEL as their primary platform for the endpoint versus just a backup option.
Yeah. So for the second one we're going to talk about here in a second, I'm literally doing that right now. It's not. It's I'm um, on my LG Gram. I've got Windows and Ubuntu Linux in a dual boot scenario, and then I just use my IGEL UD Pocket to boot to IGEL, and then I've got it set up with multi monitors like I would if it's just like my Windows laptop to my left here. I could plug that in and I get the same multi-monitor experience. I'm doing today's call via Zoom through my cloud PC. I could also, if Microsoft infrastructure is down, I could just
Yeah.
fire up the Zoom local app and we could have the same conversation.
And Chris, I want to also challenge something you said just now, just only the point of clarity. You are using your Windows desktop in the cloud, doesn't matter which cloud, in this case, it's Azure, and you're using an IGEL endpoint operating system running at the moment. It sounds like off a USB key. And you're doing this magical thing, which has come so far and is so reliable these days, which is you're offloading, in this case, the Zoom session for the unified communications piece. And it just kind of works these days if you got things done correctly.
Yeah, and I tested it yesterday. I've got three monitors here, and I wanted to present and make sure that, hey, if I'm sharing my third monitor, whatever, is it working as expected? From an audio video thing, the video cam's working just fine. Uh, I've got a headset plugged in here, and I can hear you just fine. So a lot's come a long way, and even internally within IGEL, we're doing what's called IGEL on IGEL. So we have IGEL laptops issued out, and you have the option of using a cloud PC or web apps, whatever you need, as well as some local apps.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mentioned browsers a while ago, Island browser and several others, including Chrome and Mozilla Firefox in your world. That when the world becomes mostly, if not exclusively, SaaS-based applications, this conversation around the endpoint resiliency is going to be where the focus is, I believe, because the backend stuff is going to be so distributed and so impenetrable, maybe not the right word, but so resilient that this endpoint piece is going to be where the focus will have to be at that point.
Yeah, no, we've talked about it many times. At the end of the day, what is easier to get to? Their workspace. And a lot of these apps, if I'm building something from the ground up, it's going to be browser based to start. And IGEL as currently going on our IGEL on tour. You were at the one in New York. I was one in Boston. We've got a few others that are out there. There's one in Sydney, Australia going on. I've had a chance to speak at those. Island presented for me recently in front of my presentation. I'm very impressed with obviously what they've been able to do. They keep adding more and more capabilities into that browser, and we were talking about, truly, I mean, getting to a point where everything I need to do and function is delivered from a browser. And what's better than a secure browser that can be managed and even that's what's interesting is that maybe I shouldn't say this, but they're be able to deliver published applications. So forgive me if I spilled the beans on that, but you got some really cool stuff that very excited to see here for customers to take into account.
And that's probably true, Chris. We'll just leave it at that for the moment. But it's absolutely something I believe they're working on.
Well, then I probably should not have said that, but
I think what we
moving on.
said is fine. I think what we said is fine. I think it's commonly known that they know that's one of the last frontiers for making the browser the answer to all things application on the endpoints is getting
Yeah.
access to those legacy x86 apps. Which my favorite topic in that one is Windows is a legacy x86 app, and
Yeah.
I will debate anybody on that.
One last thing on the USB boot, real quickly. So, when a customer buys the dual boot or the business continuity solution, you will get the dual boot and the option for the USB boot in case, for example, the hard drive does die and you can't dual boot. You could still take the option of going to the IGEL USB key. Obviously, managing that, sitting there in an envelope on the back of the mug, whatever it is, but that is an option you will get. It's included. You just need to, do you want those devices or not when you purchase the disaster recovery solution?
Yeah,
So
that's interesting. Yeah, it really is. Okay, last of the bullets here, the numbers. Enterprise grade security by design. IGEL OS is read only, modular, and tamper resistant. I love the word resistant there. You're not willing to from a covering your basis perspective, not willing to say 100% impenetrable, but it's pretty damn close, and way more resistant than your typical Linux non-read-only operating system, your Apple, Mac, or your Google, or Windows in this case. It's intentionally secure, so the device remains in good state while booted and reboots back to that same good state. Anything to add on the enterprise grade security comment there, Chris?
well, it's just, reemphasizing everything we've talked about on this podcast and elsewhere that, it's the same immutable operating system that's booting up here with the same preventive security architecture model, such as, users aren't going to be able to tamper with the configuration settings. This assumes, obviously, you've locked things down and you're controlling all those capabilities, which you would normally do in production. They're not going to be able to download applications. Everything that you need that device to do, you have 100% complete control over that. And if something were to happen, it's just reboot it. Generally speaking, it's fine. It's going to come right back up like it was before. But what we're finding is Okay, if I'm going to be operating in a downtime somewhat scenario, am I getting to, what am I getting to? IGEL gives you all those options, right? I need to get it to VDI, my backup VDI, or DAS, or I just need a browser to get to Office or whatever so we can communicate with customers, take emails or help desk call, whatever it is, right? And so IGEL gives you that flexibility, or you incorporate from a solution perspective, hey, Island's going to be part of this, or whatever, and you piece all those things together. Now you have a solid solution.
Yeah. Chris, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing on the screen, but I did a net stat on my Windows computer that I'm using for this. I'd love to see like a net stat, similar type thing on your IGEL unit. You know, it's not just Windows. We spend a lot of time talking about Windows. It's not necessarily just Windows that's the blessing and the curse here. It's all those applications that either come on Windows or have been loaded, after months and months and months of use on that Windows computer. It's not just a Windows might be our problem scenario on the endpoint. It's a holistic platform of what's on top of Windows that could be the concern in the security model. And from an IGEL perspective, we just limit it to what's appropriate, and you can't add more stuff to it unless it's systematically done. Therefore, the problem doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I'll say this till I'm dead in my grave, for example. When I came to IGEL, I sold right into federal. The very first thing I experienced selling into that market was, hey, we're going to scan your operating system first and foremost. I mean, we are a federal government entity, whatever, and so go ahead. Every single time they're scanning, just like you were saying, hey, what ports are open? I mean, they come back and you're like, we're not finding much here at all. And, they ask us, can we actually get into the device? I'm like, well, we don't allow for that by default. And so, but we already had a limited capability. So if you have a bad actor scanning the network looking for devices, they're going to see, very little when it comes to IGEL. They're like, I don't know what that is, and move on. It's very difficult to try to even break in because of the security posture, let alone allowing the user to modify or make changes that might open up a capability. Now, to your point, we have a top-notch security team that is always keeping their eyes open for, hey, is there anything out there that might impact us at the OS level or within an application, whatever? And so we stay on top of those regularly.
So, Chris, we're probably out of time at this point. I want to hit the last two sections here, why this matters. Going back to some numbers from the IBM study, 86% of organizations suffering operational downtime, lost productivity, all adds up to 4.4 average, 4.4 million in average daily cost when a data breach happens, over 10.22 million in the U.S. alone. Trying to make this number good. Anyway, a lot of money goes out the window when something bad happens. Again, it might not be an attack. It might just be, somebody pushed out something that just took things down. It was supposed to help and it actually hurt. Let's go to this last section and just kind of wrap this up. The title of this section from James is A New Standard for Endpoint Resiliency in BCDR. Can you kind of help explain how IGEL is looking at this through a different lens than everybody else has all these years?
Yeah, so as we talked about earlier at the beginning of the podcast, there's been a lot of effort and strategies and plans built around, accessing your backup site, your data backup site, that type of thing, whatever, and not so much thinking about what do we do about the endpoints. And so IGEL is saying we have a solution for that. Use the same devices and bring those devices back up in minutes versus days or whatever, and you have options whether you want to do the dual boot or the USB boot or flat out take another device and plug it in and bring it online with just IGEL on it overall. You have all those options. And then at the end of the day, what are you trying to get to? And you can know for sure that, hey, when I come to access those applications or data from a IGEL device, we know it's built on a top-notch security solution from the ground up, and I'm going to have less there. So our point is bring that endpoint strategy into full focus with considering IGEL and our ability to get you up and running in minutes.
And doing that and using the IGEL solution, which is a great first step, which takes almost no effort to implement this and very low cost way to do it. It just seems like you guys are connecting a dot for people that they didn't even, in many cases, realize need to be connected.
Yeah, and as you've talked with Klaus, our CEO, and Jeff Mitchell, for example, what we're finding is that when it comes to these scenarios, there's an entire organization within an organization, focusing on cyber insurance recovery, whatever like that. And so they're looking for solutions, and it's not necessarily, the IT team, but that's a group within it. Say, hey, this is something you can consider. Here's what we're saying. We have a solid solution for you.
Yeah. I bet every CISO out there is aware of this problem. And if they're not, the minute you kind of talk through this, they immediately see it as a problem. And it leads to a very easy conversation to have on the security side of the house, in addition to the end user compute, PC, data center, end user compute team that we've been talking to all these years that see the problem, but it wasn't their charter to fix it. Now it's a joint effort to fix it. And you guys are providing a way to do that. I'm going to read this last paragraph from James. It really does sum it up. In an era where breaches and outages are inevitable, they will happen. They're going to happen. Resilience is measured not just in whether you can recover. Most people can somehow get recovered over a period of time. It's how fast you can recover, and that's what you guys are really solving here. And we're talking, minutes at this point, not days or months or longer.
100%. That's really what it is.
Chris, I appreciate the time and look forward to the next conversation.
Certainly. Always a pleasure, Andy.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.